Hey guys, it's Ella and welcome to Leslie the Gothic group lesson 11. And our historical tidbit for this week is Gothic nightlife, or the drinking culture, which would have existed in both the Ostrogothic kingdom and Visigothic Spain and probably Gothic Crimea as well. So, there seems to have been a big divide between barbarian and Roman drinking patterns, with the former drinking beer, cervisia, and the latter drinking wine, or vinum. We have vinum loaned into the Gothic language as wien, actually. So that's a little fun fact for you. In Roman times, drinking vessels would commonly have been made of glass and would have had painted designs, but glass production declined significantly as the Western Empire fell, meaning that we end up with more earthenware vessels of this kind being produced and drunk from in the time period. So, in order to understand Gothic sort of taverns, pubs, the culture involved, we basically have to look to Roman models because, with the exception of Recepolis in Spain, and there's one possible military camp which King Theodoric might have founded in Italy, which later turned into a city, we have very little in the way of new architectural projects embarked upon by the Visigothic or the Ostrogothic kings, and this isn't especially a condemnation of them because it's not just them. In England, in France, under the Merovingians, like the kings of the migration era and of the early medieval period don't seem to have built many new cities. Rather, they were sort of and clinging to and slash or renovating former Roman settlements. And this would have been the case in regards to taverns. So rather than the invading Gothic armies of King Theodoric or King Alaric coming in and creating new taverns where Goths were sort of running it in Visigothic Spain and Ostrogothic Italy, Gothic soldiers coming in would most likely have just been doing their drinking in Roman pubs. So it's to Roman pubs that we should look for models of what a Gothic pub would have been like, such as this tavern from Pompeii. And there were two kinds of taverns mentioned in Roman literature. So we have these things called copone, or these like more seedy sort of taverns, calpone, or the more dignified taberne. And one of the big differences is you could buy a greater variety of food in a taberna, and you could also stay the night, whereas you couldn't in a calpona. So those are your two distinctions. Here is a really cool little bit of epigraphy that we have surviving. So we have a tavern menu from Roman Italy, which is now housed in a museum, I believe, in Naples, and it shows the foods they would have had available. So you could literally point to like, I want that off of the menu. So what in cena, pollum, piscem, pernam, pavonem, venatores. So it literally means hunters, which is presumably what they're referring to their customers as, which I find very interesting. Hunters, we have chicken, pullum, piscem, fish, pernam, ham, and pavonem, which is peacock. So this is referring to the kinds of things you had available. An interesting feature you might notice is that there aren't prices listed, even though we know from some Roman epigraphic sources, for instance Diocletian's edict on maximum prices, that obviously these were being sold in a monetary economy, and people would have been able to buy these items for coin. But the absence of prices is very interesting, and a fair few historians think that these earlier economies they didn't operate according to a sort of fixed price universal principle that we understand today. Like when we go into a store, we see items with a sort of fixed price for everybody mentioned, but rather the amount that an individual paid for this would be almost like a bartering, not bartering, sorry, but haggling between themselves and the innkeeper. And we see this reference in the Colloquium Ledense, where the Colloquium Monacensium Undecimum, which is a late antique language learning text, which tells the story of a young boy and his friends going to a restaurant, and they pay at the end, and presumably they're paying just the amount that they deem fair, and an amount that won't get them sort of harangued or attacked by the store owner. So that gives us an interesting insight into what the dynamics and the process of like going into a tavern like this and ordering your food would have been like. One last final note of interest is this: we've got this grain here, and then this sort of cut up circle in the middle. This almost certainly is representing bread. So what it would be is you would have chicken, some fish, some ham, or some peacock served with bread, because Isidore of Seville, the famous sort of last writing in the kingdom, says that bread is so called because it's served with every meal. So that's probably what it would have been like at the time. We can see here in a fresco from Pompeii adverts for different flavors and different brands of wine, which each would have had sort of their own different prices. And although ancient Roman taverns had many different kinds of wine on offer, this is not the case when we get to the 6th century. And the reason for this, we can tell this from Vinidarius' excerpt from Apicius. So this is a text that I call the Ostrogothic Cookbook. They are excerpts from the Roman Apicius, which have been altered from their Roman originals because the Ostrogoths did not have the same trade connections as Apicius to obtain spices. So Apicius actually has a long section in book 1 of his cookbook, which outlines several different spiced wine recipes, whereas Vinodarius here lists only 5 liquids as essential, and these are honey, must, reduced wine, pepper sauce, and raisin wine. And you can see the excerpt from the manuscript there. So these are the 5 liquids regards as essential for a kitchen, whereas Apicius had vast numbers of different kinds of alcohol and instructions for how to prepare them. So clearly, Vinodarius is expecting a less varied culinary milieu. But notice, interestingly, in Vinodarius that we don't see any mention of beer here. Now, granted, these are liquids that one uses in cooking, so perhaps that's why. Although there are obviously some contemporary recipes today that use beer in cooking as a flavouring ingredient. But, the raisin wine, the reduced wine, these seem to have been the things used in cooking. It doesn't necessarily tell us about drinking, perhaps, but I think it certainly tells us they had a reduced availability compared to Roman times. So the point of it all is that if you were to go into a Roman tavern, you would have had a more variety of foods available to you and drinks available to you than if you went into an Ostrogothic or a Visigothic tavern. Here is a fresco from Pompeii showing some fine silverware on which the Roman elite would have dined. And granted, the Ostrogothic and Visigothic elite, the noble kings, probably would have dined on similarly fine Tupperware as well. Tupperware, weird way to silverware as well. But your average Goth probably would not have been able to afford this. They would have been eating on Roman Samian ware, which has finally loaded up. This is a really dirt cheap kind of pottery. You find it all around, and it's so ubiquitously Roman that when we get in far-flung places, we sort of take it as evidence of Ostrogothic travel. In fact, one of the evidences we have for early Roman contact with Ireland. And although Ireland was certainly never colonized, it seems that there was some trade of Roman goods to early medieval Ireland during the time, but ancient Ireland during the time of the Roman Empire, and we can tell this from finds of pottery like this in Ireland, but that's a unrelated tangent. And here we have some more ordinary Roman fare. This is granted from a site in Roman Britain, but this is the sort of eating and drinking paraphernalia which would have been very commonplace in any tavern in the Roman Empire, including therefore a tavern in Ostrogothic or Visigothic kingdoms. And you will notice this cup here, which is almost certainly a drinking cup. These plates for food you might eat. This glass jar, which would have had some maybe a kind of table condiment, who knows. And down here in the left-hand corner, we have these bone gaming pieces, because we know from frescoes and other such that gaming was quite a popular pastime that would happen in these pubs. So we don't, unfortunately, we don't really have the rules of any such games recorded in quite explicit terms, but we do know of one which is referenced quite often called Lulus Latrum Colorum, which is the game of petty thieves, and it was especially popular using tiles like in the previous slide. And actually, there are a fair few applications you can download for your phone which lets you play against a computer. It's quite fun. Here is another one, a fresco from Pompeii, showing two men playing dice games on this tabula, this like board that is held, which seems to actually be supported on each other's legs. They seem to be sitting on stools, and the board is held up by both of their legs, which is quite interesting when you think about it. It means that, well, they both have to be relatively still when they're playing, and then also symbolically it sort of means that the game sort of relies on their mutual cooperation, which might be threatened by the captions in this particular piece, which is just so charming, because the one on the left says out, and or you're out, and the one on the right says no, it's 3 twos. Presumably that means that he has not in fact lost the game. So maybe the one on the left, after this picture was drawn, sort of stood up and threw off the board and walked out in anger, not wanting to play anymore. This is just another one that's like the cutest thing. It's so human. I'm here for it. So this is another fresco from Pompeii. It shows a waiter in white who seems to be a woman, actually. Like it looks like a woman, and you might notice from the sort of slight crisscrossing in her hair, it looks like she's wearing hairnet. Actually, very interesting. And she comes over and she asks, who ordered this? So the man in red, who is the furthest left, he points to this other guy in green and says, it's him. And the man in green says, it's not mine. So a really classic case of somebody's prepared the wrong order in a tavern, just like we'd have today. It's so charming. I'm here for it. I'm absolutely here for it. We can see also in the Gothic language, trying to bring this back more specifically to what the Ostrogothic and Visigothic experiences would have been like. While meal names in Gothic seem to be native and reflect sort of native orderings of the day, so we have Morgenmats, which is breakfast, and Nachtemats, which is dinner, and Undornemats, which is again I think like breakfast or lunch. They seem to have borrowed certain approaches from the Romans, and we can see this in the word anacumbion, which comes as a loan word from recumbere in Latin, which means to recline, as the Romans in the fresco do, because both, it seems, at taverns and at sort of fancy private meals, the I guess elite method of dining would not be to sit down at a table, but actually you'd be lying down on these sofas that these people are lying on. And these, in Latin they're called a triclinia, for these like reclining areas, and people would have a table in the middle, like you see here, with food and drink on, and they would eat over the day, they would talk, and you would have little servants like this boy here in red bringing food and water back and forth. So this goes to show that like Roman methods of dining seem to have rubbed off on the Goths as well. Here is another example of Roman dining. This is from a depiction of an agape feast, and the woman is toasting and saying a common early Christian toast, agape misce nobis. It means sort of divine love sort of mixes together, which I find very endearing as a thing. And this guy here actually is saying purge, so like purge oneself, get rid of it. Maybe he's referring to vomiting. It's hard to say. It's quite interesting stuff. And we can see not just women but also men and children eating and drinking together at this feast. Very egalitarian. It's quite charming. And that's it for our historical tidbit. So hopefully that's given you a sense of what Roman taverns, and then largely by extension sort of Ostrogothic and Visigothic pub tavern experiences would have been like. And it brings us on quite neatly to our 11th lesson, and I am fairly sure that this is where we left off in the textbook last time. Um, is Somebody has a question before we do. Would Garum have been as popular with the Goths as with the Romans? Interesting question. I would guess no, because Garum was acknowledged by other literate societies in the ancient world to be a very weirdly Roman thing, and Ovid or Horace, I can't remember which, um, remarks on how it gives one terrible breath, and he sort of, I think it's Ovid, compliments a man on having the fortitude to kiss a Roman woman who had just eaten a meal with lots of garum on it. A key distinction, I suppose, would be that garum would be the table sauce, a bit like ketchup, and liquamen was a similar kind of sauce, but that was used in cooking. Now, if we accept that Vinodarius's excerpts of Apicius are in fact Ostrogothic, we have to accept that they were still using liquamen at a bare minimum, because he often includes liquamen in his recipes. Um, However, I would imagine that garum might have fallen out of favour. One thing though to remember is that, especially in the Ostrogothic kingdom, in the Visigothic kingdom, because it lasts not only it lasts longer, so it has more time to lose its Romanness before the Moors take over Spain, but also the it's further away from the center of empire in Rome, with its connections to the east and to Byzantium and Africa and whatnot. So this means that Spain sort of can lose its Romanitas quicker, and therefore probably it didn't consume it stopped consuming garum and liquamen earlier than the Ostrogothic kingdom. Because remember, the Ostrogothic kingdom in Italy is not even 100 years old. It's, goodness, it's like 493 to 553, I believe, Common Era. So it's literally sort of a single person's lifetime could encompass it. And in fact, Cassiodorus basically is that person. Like he lived over to 100 years, and he would have been a teenager when the roughly, I believe, when the Goths were entering Italy. He would have grown up under that system, and then he was there to see the reconquering of Italy by Emperor Justinian also. So he would have seen both ends of it. And if you imagine within that time period, right? If one, like, if Cassiodorus from his childhood was like eating garum with all of his meals, you can imagine, first of all, that he probably kept up the custom for himself, if he was able to, and if he had access to this food stuff, he probably kept it up into his adulthood and old age. And I don't know if that's like enough time for the practice of creating and consuming garum to entirely fade out of Ostrogothic Italy. So my guess would be that the Ostrogoths, at least some of them, probably did at a minimum have exposure to garum. There would have been Romans around them eating garum, and if they'd gone into a Roman tavern, they might have had they might have pointed at the menu and ordered their ham and bread, for instance, and that ham might have come slathered in garum, and they may not have liked it very much, but that might have been what they had to eat at the time. So that's a very long answer to a short question, but the short answer is it would not have been as popular with the Goths as with the Romans. Yes, so unless anyone has a different question. Oh, sorry, and someone also asked, if would peacock be a rare thing to eat? I believe so, yes. Peacock was like a relatively expensive food, but all sorts of meats are like comparatively expensive. Fish would of course have been the cheapest of the food stuff that we saw on that menu to eat. But yeah, peacock is relatively rare, quite expensive. That seems to have been the fanciest option on that menu, I would say. Interestingly enough, we don't have any mention of peacock, I believe, in Vinodarius. I might be wrong, but I don't think we do. So maybe it wasn't available to more everyday people like Vinodarius. So let us go on to our 11th lesson. So we are doing some irregular verbs here. So the past tense of wisan, which is the verb for to be, it's highly irregular, and you need to learn it by heart because it's one of the most common and also most useful verbs in the whole of the Gothic language. So here we have a chart for it. So singular first person is was, which is so I was. Wast is you were. Was is again he, she, it, or they was. Wesum is we were. Wesuth is you plural were, and then wesun is they were. And I mean, these will become familiar to you with time because they're very common. And we have some new words in our word stock. So we have guta, which is goth, gutan, which is goth. Again, but in the accusative form. Gutans is goths. Angils, which is Englishmen. Leek, which is body. Swarts, which is black. Wheats, which is white. Roths, which is red. Bleus, which is blue. Gilus, which is yellow. Wolfres, which means important, and manna, which is person in the nominative, and then manan in the accusative. And now we have a couple of phrases that you guys will probably find very useful to use. So in Gutiska means in Gothic. So in Gutiska rarian mar is like I can speak in Gothic. You might want to remember that one. Andizuch etho means either or. So like Andizuch in Gutiska rarian mar etho nimar. So I can either speak in Gothic or I cannot. Or to say it a different way, Andizuch in Gutiska rarian mar etho in Anglis. I can speak either in Gothic or in English. So there you go. Enamasinta is at one time, once. Was is there was, and then wesun is there were. You don't need that. This is to go to say that you don't need a phrase like we do in English, like how you have to say there was or there were. You can just say was, were, and you can go on from there. So let us having done all this, let us do some questions. Yay! So, would somebody kindly translate a phrase for me from Gothic into English, such as the first one, which Yoshi has very helpfully typed out in chat for us. Ik en namasinta sa gumma wastanikant, which is very appropriate for my life story, incidentally. Not for you guys, but for other people. Ik en namasinta sa gumma wastanikant, she said with weird amounts of rhythm in her intonation. Yeah, I'm in like play half until I get an answer. Come on, anyone want to give me an answer? Diogo, Rosaves? Don't leave me hanging. It's going to be so awkward. Paleo? Don't be shy. Yeah, so I was once a man, or that man that he no, this is actually not that. It's that you knew, I believe. Rani Kant. So I was once the man, or that man that you knew. So good, very good. If you're watching this on YouTube, you should do these on your own. And we're actually going to set up groups where you can do these on your together with us, and we can do it together, and you can ask questions, get help, etc. For now, let us move on. So we come to another important verb, which is havan, and we're going to learn how to do havan, but in the past. And although havan is a very common and important verb, it's actually regular, which is unusual. So, what is it? We will cover the class of verbs that havan belongs to later on. No, regular. I said regular. Oh, did I say irregular? Me maxima culpa. Havan is regular. So we will look at the class of verbs it belongs to, which is the third week class later. So the past of havan is havera is I had, haveres is you had, havera is he, she, it, or they had. Havederum is we had. Havederuth is you plural had. And havederun is they had. So that's your conjugation for havan. Remember it, it's important. So another important part of this lesson is Gothic's number system, and we're just going to do the numbers up to 10 for now, thank God. I'm just kidding, I just don't like numbers. There are 3 classes of numbers to be learned here. So the first class is the number ens, meaning 1, and this number is totally regular, ens. It follows the the masculine A stem class, which was already taught in an earlier lesson. And Arthur is very kind names of numbers in chat. Therefore, we don't need to teach the declension pattern of n here. The numbers 2 and 3, meaning 2 and 3 respectively, are both irregular and need to be explained outright. Although the patterns are very much like others already used in the language, the patterns still need to be taught. So, 2, twans is the nominative and accusative for 2, if it's masculine, twas and twas if it's feminine, and then twa if it's neuter. As you may have seen with others before, the feminine and the neuter don't change going from nominative to the accusative. This isn't always the case, but it's quite often the case, whereas the masculine does. So we have twa and twans. And then when we get to 3, for masculine and feminine forms, it's threes for the nominative and threins for the accusative. Whereas for the neuter, it's just threa and threa throughout for nominative and accusative. All of the numbers at 4 on and above do not change depending upon either the nominative or the accusative case. They will change for other cases, but we've not taught these cases yet, so you can just think about these 3 above as unchanging. They also don't change depending upon gender at any time, which is helpful. So we come to our word stock, and we've got some new words to learn. How exciting. So we have sums, which is someone, faderins, which is a family, ens, which is 1, twe, which is 2, threes, which is 3, fyrwar, which is 4, fimp, which is 5, sex, which is 6, which is 7, achtor, which is 8, nion, which is 9, and tehun, which is 10. And I believe we may have had this word before, but anyway, froths is wise, jungs is young, manas is many, aftra is again, than is then, and than can also mean when. It depends on the context and how one uses them. We've got a couple more phrases, one of which you've already had. So sunyava is actually, in fact, in Gutiska is in Gothic. And then bisunye is actually or really. And I would go over these, but given that we had very tepid responses from the group, I don't imagine there's that much point. I think anyone will give me an answer. So given that this has been done, we might as well go on to our as Axto pronounces it. Or the Gaskirins, if you want to pronounce it that way. Might be easier to say Gaskirins. Let us progress to that just as soon as my computer speeds up and lets it open. Have a chord while you wait. Come on. I'm sorry, you can see I'm literally just like clicking it to my computer. It's just not loading the damn thing. This would be a time, if anyone has any more questions, I suppose, to post them in chat. Do we even have it down there that we can go to? Ah, goodness. Arthur is asking how we decline Huns into the duel, and I actually don't know. It might be Hundats. I don't know. He says it's a trick question. Apparently Huns does not have a dual form. Oh, there was no dual for nouns or adjectives, only verbs and pronouns. That's interesting. I did not know that. But it's good to know. Thank you. So, I'm still learning too, you guys. So, let us progress to... We've done that part last week. I think we did this last week as well. What do we have? Well, let's do this part anyway, who cares? So, nu thata nam Mikaelsida. Vregen. I misoslovje bi middagamat du rada jach misoslovida. Quath ima wela faran. Mik golida. Bife undornimat nam. Afraquam. So, can anyone identify any words that they recognize or can translate? Any cognates, perhaps? If somebody prepared sections of this to translate on their own, you can give your answers here in chat. Or if not, then I might as well just give you the translation of it. Okay, so nu nam mik lesiva is now I have received or I have taken up that which I learned. Vregen I mis uslovie mi bi midagamat lugarda. So jach mis uslovida. So vregen I mis uslovie. I asked if he would permit me be midagamat for lunch, for midday meal, lugarda home. Jach mis uslovida, and he permitted me, allowed me to do that. Quath ima wela faran, I said to him, well, Mick golida, what's the word? He greeted me, bife undornimat nam aftraquam. So when I had taken my lunch, I came back. I returned. So that's our section of the Hermeneumen Pseudodosciana, also known as the Gasquirines, part 6. And in our next lessons, I imagine we'll cover part 7 and part 8, and that will be the end of it. I believe, unless there's a part 9. Nope, looks like that is the end. So, yeah, if anyone has any questions, you can ask them in chat, or you can post them in the comments of this video. Thank you guys for watching and attending, and I will see you a lot next week for another video. And we've got a very exciting historical tidbit, which is going to be warfare for the Goths. So I hope to see you then. Have a good day. Bye.